What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Forbidden Mountain. Today, we are doing something a little fun. I put out a tweet the other day, kind of talking about all the content creators and content influencers, Lorcana influencers, all of the long list of them all, shouting out what their favorite ink was. So I'm going to have a nice little interview today with my friend here, LorcanaDad. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great, man. Yesterday was my 13th wedding anniversary with Lorcana Mom, so went out and did some fun stuff, had a spa day, kind of relaxed, and kind of gearing up and getting ready for the next couple weeks of insanity and launch on the 18th of August.
Yeah, big true, big true. So, for our friends at home, we're gonna bring your information up here, and you are Disney Lorcana Dad on Twitter and in Discord. But give the audience a little bit, about who you are and like what your influence on the game is.
So I am a Disney dad first and foremost. I have two beautiful little girls that are 8 and 4, and kind of take up the most of my time. But I love every minute of it. And I am also on YouTube and I do Instagram. And like I said, am very involved in Twitter and on Discord. And my role, I guess, so to speak, in the community is I am transitioning from a tabletop game player to TCGs for the very first time. I've never really played TCGs before this, and I found out, like most people, at D23 last year about Lorcana, and I've just kind of been not obsessed, but definitely very, very interested in the game since then. And because of the community that we've built before the game's even launched, I think we're 4,500 strong in Discord now. It's just kind of really kind of brought me into it, and I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more as the game goes on. And then, as a huge Disney collector and fan myself, the art on these cards is just really amazing, and I've fallen in love with the game before it's even out. So I can't wait to see what this game does and where it goes from here.
Yeah, seriously, the art, they're all remarkable. The Floodborne art in particular is a lot of my favorite because they're like just so original and so creative that it's insane. But yeah. So what we're gonna do is you are part of Team Steel in this what I'm calling the TFM Battle of the Inks. And your job today is to convince the viewer why they should be a part of Team Steel. All right. So we're gonna run through it, we're gonna start it up, and we're gonna give everybody a chance to really understand why you are Team Steel. So give me your spiel. Why are you Team Steel?
So for me, like I said, I have never played a TCG before, so there's a lot of a learning curve when it comes to being competitive at TCGs. And I think what drew me to Steel is, one, if you look at the Lorcana page, it tells you that Steel is strong, large, imposing, powerful characters, and they use brute force to get the job done. I like that aspect of it because when I play board games, I like to kind of just focus on myself and like getting through and getting the mission done and doing whatever I need to do to win. So that kind of drew me in. But the more you look at Steel, there's a lot of utility in Steel. There's a lot of different aspects of other decks that pop up in Steel that you don't really see spread out amongst the other inks. There's card draw, there's, control to a certain extent, and there's a lot of different things that you can pair up with other inks really well to make yourself successful. And that's what really drew me to Steel in the first place, is that you can mix and match and do a lot of different things with Steel.
Yeah, tend to agree. Tend to agree. All right, so that's why we are Steel. We're gonna start talking about our favorite things about Steel. So your favorite character in Steel is Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and I imagine this is true for a lot of Steel fans. But what draws you to the Giant Fairy other than the incredible art?
So for me, I would say that this is, if not the best, the second best card in the entire first chapter. Some people would argue Genie, and there is some merit to that. But for me, this is the most affordable Floodborne character out there. It's inkable. It has pretty decent stats as far as the body goes, 2 lore and multiple abilities that allow you to do different things. Looking at the abilities, you do damage when the card comes in, so you get kind of that upfront attack, which is really, really nice. And then the AoE damage obviously is really nice part of that. But the other part of it is when you are banishing a character, you can do more damage to somebody else, which I know a lot of times you will challenge a character and kind of wipe out your character's stats to do that, and trading off cards, but the ability to not only focus on one character but also do damage to another character is really, really good. And then, like I said, you can play this card turn 4 if you can get the other Tink out. And then obviously having the Amethyst Tinkerbell we got this week makes it, gives you a little bit more synergy with the Amethyst ink. And I think down the road, we'll probably have a Tinkerbell in every ink. She's definitely an iconic character. But for me, that alone makes it the best card in the deck. And then obviously the art is just really cool. And it's a really interesting kind of role reversal to see Tinkerbell being that big.
Yeah, I agree. And you didn't even mention this, but she also shifts.
Yes. So obviously being a shift character,
so many things.
Yeah, she's the cheapest shift character too, which I think is really good. And then
well, I think now Captain Hook is, right?
Yeah, so Captain Hook, yes, by 1, but he's also not inkable.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
we're not comparing.
Yeah. So I like that, but yeah, looking at the Floodborns, I think right now it's 50-50 between inkable and not inkable, and I think being inkable just gives it that edge. And then not to mention, if you like, you're talking about Hook, if you compare the two, I would still think Tinkerbell was better if it had 1 lore and Hook had 2, but it's the other way around. Tink has 2, and she's inkable, and she's a better card.
She's
so
insane.
Yeah, it's just
no doubt.
I call her Turbo Tink, and I think that it's gonna be a playset for if you can get it, and it's a super rare. It's not even like a legendary card, people should be able to get their hands on a playset of these. And I think especially in steel decks early on, you're going to see playsets of Turbo Tink in almost every single steel deck.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Card's absolutely phenomenal, no doubt about it. All right, so what about our favorite item? You have a very interesting choice here in Frying Pan. So why do you like Frying Pan?
So I like Frying Pan because it does give you a little bit of control where you can make sure that another person's character can't challenge on the next turn. So it protects your other characters a little bit. And honestly, there's not a lot to pick from when it comes to items. I know a lot of people probably would have leaned towards the Musketeer Tabard here, but we haven't seen enough bodyguard characters, I think, in other inks to make it really valuable to me, because you're not only having to have a certain type of character, but it's only when you lose that character that you get the benefit. So to me, that's just kind of an insurance policy more than anything. Whereas the Frying Pan, you get rid of the card, yes, and that's the one thing that you don't have in Steel right now is item recovery. We only have 1 card that does that, and it's in Sapphire, which I don't really want to play Sapphire. So you do lose the card, but you basically get a skip turn for an opponent for one of their cards. So you can choose something that is going to run into one of your characters and banish your characters and say, nope, you're not doing it next turn, and kind of give yourself a little bit of a lifeline. And then obviously Beast's Mirror is just not a good card to me. I don't like the fact that you get these cards where you have to like pay and then pay again just to get a card. And Beast's Mirror is so restrictive because you can only use it if you don't have any cards in your hand.
Right.
And we've already seen a better card that does this in this Steel Ink, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. The only saving grace I will have for Beast's Mirror, which as a collector, which I mentioned in the hobbies, oh my God, I can't even say it, Hobbies and Happiness podcast, is that I really think based off how simple the card art is for this, I want to see on a foil if there's a reflection in the mirror. I just think that'd be such a smart thing to do and would make the card very, very collectible, but I just don't see it being used in the deck that much.
That concept of a foil would be awesome. Like I hope you are so spot on with that. When we were on there the other night and talking and you said that, I'm like, man, that is so cool.
I've thought it since I saw the card. I was like, there has to be something more here because this is just very simple.
It's fair. All right. So our favorite action and song. You can choose the order.
So the action, I think, is also, again, pretty self-explanatory. I like the fact that this card in particular can reoccur and come back with the Jolly Roger Captain Hook. that early game has seen a lot of play in games that I've played where it's just like, I'm going to fire the cannons, and then on my next turn, I'm going to get hook, and then I'm going to pull my cannons back out, and then I'm going to cannon you again, and then I'm going to play another hook. And it's really good kind of keeping early zoos at bay where you can kind of knock out people's baby mals or Pascals or some of the other, like Flounder can't stand up to the cannons kind of thing. I really like the ability to kind of limit what your opponent can do early, to kind of help build up, because that's the one thing about steel is some of the more heavy cards that do a lot for you are more expensive. So you kind of have to weather that tide early on, of your opponents maybe having a zoo or doing some smaller characters, and you might find yourself in a hole a little bit early with steel, and cards like Fire the Cannons really help you kind of combat that early on.
Yeah, 100% agree. Card's phenomenal, and it does everything you want it to do. And then the added bonus of getting it back is just all the better.
Absolutely. And then as far as my song goes, we only had two to pick from, and one of them is vastly superior to the other one. They're both 5 cost. They're both uninkable, so there's really an easy comparison to make there. But the other card is just dealing 2 damage to opponents. So again, if you have an opponent that's got a lot of they have 2 or 3 flounders out or something like that, then yes, grab the sword would be a good play there. But I think Whole New World gives you a lot more adaptability for a late game situation where if you're playing an opponent that has a heavy card draw and you start running out of cards, which seems to be around this 5, 6, 7 turn mark, you can reset the game essentially, and get rid of your opponent's hand, get rid of your hand, and get 7 new cards in your hand and kind of start over with hopefully a decent board state to start with, which is, again, the hard part with steel is building up a board state. So I think that if you get to the point where you can have a good board state and then draw 7 new cards, really kind of makes you powerful and gives you a boost towards the mid to late stages of the game.
Yeah, especially I would say the fact that you can literally just tap any of your 5 cross characters and get it for free, reset your hands, and then move the turn forward kind of like whenever you feel it's necessary. Card's pretty phenomenal, no doubt. Great choices. All right, so for next, we have what's your favorite combinations of cards within the ink so far? So, what are your setup cards that you're really loving, as your packages for the ink?
So again, I think I really like the shiftable tank. You can get her out pretty early. I would argue she's probably the quickest Floodborne character you can get out on the board. Technically, it would be Hook, but again, Hook's not inkable, and his ability is not as great as Tink's is. I think she does a lot more dynamic stuff, and she has more lore. But I really like the combination of playing a bodyguard with a bigger character. So, if you've got a character that maybe doesn't have a lot of, and not necessarily in steel, but in other inks where it might have not as good of a body, but it has a decent ability, and you can get it to where you can play, say, Simba or Hercules, or not our Simba in steel, excuse me, but you can play Hercules early on as a bodyguard. I think adds a lot of value. He's only worth, he's only got 3/3, so he's probably not going to stick around more than a couple turns. But at least he lets you keep those bigger characters on the board longer, and I think that's what steel really does well. Is you got to keep your big bodies churning and keep them moving on the board. Because if people can take them off the board for you, then you're just spending a lot of money to not do, or spending a lot of resource, if you will, to not do much. But I really like the shifting Tinkerbell, the Captain Hook early. Forceful Duelist gets you that extra challenger ability, which is nice. Kristoff early on, he's worth 2 lore, is really good. And then some of my later game moves that I really like are if you can play Whole New World and then drop Gantu right afterwards, you're going to have a whole deck of cards and be able to play Gantu, and go from there. And then one of the other, which we can talk about in a minute, but my card combination ink colors that I like is ruby and steel. I like the idea of doing a board wipe and then following it up with Gantu, just because not only did you just clear the board, but you've put down a character that your other opponent cannot just play a bunch of cheap cards to build up their board state again, and they're going to have to spend lore or spend ink on bigger bodies and more expensive cards to try to catch up to you, which I think is where Steel would then turn and get an advantage, where our bigger cards are more powerful than a lot of the other inks. So yeah, and then Ruby, I think the one thing that Steel necessarily doesn't do great is everything's attackable. You do have bodyguard, but there's really not a whole lot of evasive, and Ruby gives you that. Ruby gives you a lot of evasive. And then one of the other things that I've mentioned before, but when you play Steel, sometimes you end up early in a hole because you're kind of prepping for late game. The Ruby characters, there's a couple, Rapunzel and Outlaw Aladdin, they allow you Steel lore, which kind of brings it back down and helps you kind of push to make that final climb to 20. And I think that they work really, really, really well together. And I think, like I said early on, Steel for me is all about utility. And I think that for that reason, you can use it with pretty much any ink. I've played it with every ink combination, and I haven't really seen anything where I'm like, ooh, that's not great. But because it's so utility driven in my mind, you can plug it into anything, but I really do like it with Ruby. Amethyst would probably be my second choice just because of the card draw and getting some of those bigger bodies out early. Card draw is really important for that, but I'm going to have to go with Ruby and Steel.
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of great information for anyone listening on great things to do with all your Steel cards. I think the one thing I have for you is how do you feel about your late game, like your 6s, your 7s and 8s, so your Krunks, your Mauis, and the Zimba that you did reference accidentally in a way?
Yeah, so for me, late game starting in like the 6, 7, 8. So obviously you've got Musketeer Mickey with the bodyguard. He's got a big butt, so there's a lot of other opportunity to protect other characters there. Kronk, obviously, pretty powerful. He's a 6/6, so that's always nice to see. Maui again is an 8/8 with 3 lore. So if you can get Maui out and then put a bodyguard Mickey in front of him, you can basically just keep chugging with Maui, and there's not really much that's going to stop him.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Yeah, he's a big boy. Gantu, I didn't really like him at first, but if you can get him out mid game, where you've got a lot of characters for your opponent that are on the lower end of the spectrum, where maybe you let them kind of stick around for a little bit, they become basically worthless, and you can just smash them all you want. And then Simba, he's evasive. He's got +4 challenger, so he can take out some of your bigger threats. But again, pretty expensive on the 7. And that's the thing too. I haven't seen. I think Ruby's the only one we've seen a 9 in. Maybe one other ink.
No, just Ruby so far.
So I'm wondering, are we going to get a 9 in Steel? If so, I mean, it's going to have to be pretty powerful, considering the Gantu at an 8 is already a 6/6 with 2 lore. I would imagine that anything more expensive than that's going to have really beefy stats.
Right.
And just be kind of.
I am wondering if we'll get like the 9-drop 9/9 with 4 lore or something like that, just to like complete the whole 6, 7, 8, 9 package.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's going to be the Lilo, so the space Lilo. If that's the 9, that would be kind of crazy. Because she's such a small character, but as we've seen with Lorcana, that doesn't really matter.
Maybe, yeah, who knows? Just to be fun, why not?
It'll be fun, but I do hope, and we still have quite a few Steel cards to go. And then obviously, from what we've seen, there are 2 legendaries per ink, so we should theoretically have 1 more legendary. And looking at Ruby, you've got obviously that 9 is a legendary, so I would suspect, do the math, that probably the legendary card is going to be the 9-drop for Steel, and whether that's Lilo or something else, yet to be seen. But hopefully this week during Lorcana week we can get some information. If not, we'll know everything in a few weeks during Gen Con, and
very true,
a couple weeks later be able to play the game.
Very true, very true. All right, so our last thing that we're going to do is I'm going to give you the opportunity to take the floor and convince the community why they absolutely need to be on Team Steel. Take the floor, sir.
So I think like I've said, Team Steel is all about utility. You can do pretty much anything with steel, and it pairs well with almost every single other ink color. And if you're like me, where you're learning the TCG for the first time, this is a good set of cards to kind of get your feet wet and learn. They're not overly complicated. There's not a lot of designated lanes for combos that you need to learn to be able to be successful. You can just kind of have fun with it and plug it in with any other ink. So that's why I think Steel is the best ink, especially for new players.
I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. I had to finish it, right?
Tim McGraw.
Exactly. That is it's great. You know, I think Steel is a wonderful, wonderful ink in the game. It has some of the most powerful cards, as you already mentioned over and over again. And we didn't even touch the barrier of like everything it probably has to offer. But there's so much that it gives to the game. And like you said, it really does feel like it can pair with everything. And I think that's my favorite part about this ink in general is it just has this package that goes with this and that package that goes with that. And I think that's really exciting. And that's what I personally have loved about Steel throughout it for sure.
Yeah,
But
it is definitely the potato of Lorcana. It just, you can put it in any dish and it works just
I
fine.
love it. I love that reference. It's great. I don't know if I would call the Steel potato, but I do like it.
I mean, Gantu kind of looks like a potato, so that, you know, that works too.
It's very true. Well, thank you so very much for joining me today. It was very nice to finally having a bit of a one-on-one chat with you outside of the text box of Discord or Twitter or anything like that. So it's really nice to get some FaceTime with you.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, Dan. Thanks so much for all you guys do. And look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in Miami and seeing you guys on webcam at some point playing games with each other
That's right. You're
very,
not
very
so
soon.
you won't be at Gen Con, right?
No, I had a wedding that I was going to go to, and then the wedding got canceled. But by the time we
Oh,
found out it got canceled, I couldn't really get plane tickets, and I couldn't get a hotel, and couldn't get off work. So, but I will
right.
be in Miami, and then I do plan on being at D23 next year in September as well.
Okay. And then once again, make sure everyone knows where to find you at LorcanaDad, right?
Pretty much at LorcanaDad everywhere. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm in Discord as at LorcanaDad. There is a at LorcanaDaddy on Instagram, and I did reach out to him and ask him, "Hey man, what's going on here?" And
I
haven't
think
heard
I
back
saw
yet.
this. I saw this in Discord. It made me chuckle.
Yeah, I'm
You
hoping
were
that it's
blaming B
somebody.
squared.
I thought it was B Squared trolling me at first, but he swears it's not him. So, because he does call me daddy, which is, it's only weird if you make it weird,
Yeah. It's cool.
but yeah, I haven't heard back from them, and they don't have any posts, so I don't know what their goal is. But I just thought it was
Sweet.
kind of funny that
I
there's a
thought
Lorcana
I
daddy out there
definitely
now.
laughed.
Yeah, I did too, but we'll
Stuff.
see. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can find me at Lorcana Dad pretty much everywhere else.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for enjoying this. Hopefully, LorcanaDad has convinced you to join Team Steel. If you made it this far, this was a fun video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and of course, as always, follow at LorcanaDad everywhere you can. Thank you guys for this awesome video, and we'll see you in the next one.